The day began like any other bright, sunny Saturday. I was humming to myself in the kitchen, packing our picnic basket with snacks. It was a day we'd all been looking forward to, our annual family trip to Adventureland amusement park. It was a tradition we started when my daughter, Ashley, was just a little girl. Now, at 21, she'd grown into this tall, confident young woman, someone I admired, but sometimes it gave me a strange feeling I couldn't quite place. It felt like just yesterday, I was teaching her to ride her bike. My husband, Mark, had suggested this trip. He said we all needed to reconnect, have some fun. Life had been so hectic lately, and this seemed like the perfect chance to just breathe. The plan was a weekend full of laughter, cotton candy, and screaming our lungs out on roller coasters. But little did I know, this trip would completely change how I saw my family and myself. We piled into our SUV, a mix of excitement and that comfortable feeling of being together filling the car. My youngest, Ryan, was in the back, glued to his phone as usual, but every now and then he'd look up and flash me a smile. I noticed how his gaze lingered on me a little longer than usual, a warmth in his eyes that made my heart skip a beat. I couldn't really explain it, so I just chalked it up to the excitement of the trip. As soon as we arrived at Adventureland, the smell of popcorn and the sound of happy screams filled the air. We spent hours going from one ride to the next, playing those silly carnival games and indulging in all sorts of sugary treats. It was like stepping back in time, reminding me of when Ashley was small, tugging on my hand, begging for just one more spin on the carousel. Now, it was her leading the way, turning back every so often to make sure I was keeping up. Around lunchtime, Mark decided to take a break and find a bench in the shade. Ashley and I decided to go explore the rest of the park on our own. We headed straight for the Ferris wheel. It was always the ride we saved for last. As the giant wheel slowly carried us high above the park, a sense of calm washed over me. For that moment, it was just the two of us, suspended in the sky with the whole world spread out below. "You've always been there for me, haven't you?" Ashley said quietly, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Of course," I replied, smiling. "That's what moms do." But her gaze was intense, filled with something more than I could understand. "It's more than that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been more than just a mom to me. You've been everything." A chill ran down my spine. Her words were gentle, but they carried a weight that made my heart race. I laughed it off, trying to ease the sudden tension. "Well, I am your mother. It's kind of my job." But Ashley didn't laugh. She leaned in closer, her eyes still searching mine, like she was looking for something I couldn't give. "You mean more to me than just that," she whispered, and a knot formed in my stomach. This was my daughter. We couldn't be having this conversation. I quickly shifted, trying to distract us both. "Ashley, what are you saying?" She turned away, staring out at the horizon as if trying to gather her thoughts. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "But I feel something when I'm with you, something I can't ignore." I recoiled inwardly, feeling like I'd been splashed with ice water. I was her mother. This was wrong. I wanted to end the conversation, but the words seemed to get stuck in my throat. The ride ended, and I stood up quickly, forcing a bright smile. "Let's go find your dad," I said, my voice feeling tight. The rest of the day passed in a bit of a haze. I tried to focus on the fun, on the simple joy of being with my family, but something had shifted. Ashley's gaze lingered on me more times than I cared to admit. Her eyes were filled with a warmth that made my skin prickle, and the worst part? A small, hidden part of me didn't want her to look away. That night, we returned to the cabin we had rented. Mark, exhausted from the day, went straight to bed, but Ashley and I stayed up on the porch, the sound of crickets and rustling leaves filling the silence. "Mom?" Ashley's voice broke the stillness. "I need to tell you something." I could feel where this was going, and I tried to stop it before it even started. "Ashley, please," I said, my voice shaky. "Whatever you're feeling, it's not—" "I can't help it," she interrupted. "I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. And I think you feel it too." My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. "Ashley, this isn't right. I'm your mother." She reached for my hand, holding it gently. "I know," she said, her voice trembling. "But when I look at you, I don't just see my mom. Mom, I see someone I can't stop thinking about. I yanked my hand away, standing up suddenly. No, I said, though my voice wavered. You're confused, Ed. It's just a phase. You'll realize it was a mistake. She stood too, closing the small gap between us. What if it's not a mistake? She whispered. What if this is the truest thing I've ever felt? I turned away, tears welling up in my eyes. We can't do this, Ashley, I whispered, barely able to speak. She stood there for a long moment, then nodded slowly, stepping back. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I wiped away a tear, trying to compose myself. Let's just go inside, I said. It's late. We went back inside, the weight of what had just happened hanging between us like an unspoken truth. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew we had crossed a line, and I wasn't sure there was any going back. The next morning, the sunlight streamed in through the window, casting golden lines across the room. I lay awake, replaying the previous night's events over and over in my mind. It felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't escape. I could hear Mark snoring softly beside me, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside our bedroom. I needed to get away, to think. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, breathing in the cool morning air and the familiar scent of the woods. But the moment my hand touched the kitchen counter, the flood of emotions came rushing back. This wasn't a dream. What happened last night was real. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Ashley standing in the doorway, looking at me uncertainly. Morning, she said softly. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile that felt weak and fragile. She stepped closer. About last night, I cut her off. Ashley, let's not do this. It was late. We were both tired. We said things we didn't mean. Let's just forget it, okay? But she didn't look away. Her eyes were intense, filled with something I couldn't deny. I can't forget it, she said quietly, and I don't think you can either. I turned back to the counter, trying to steady myself. We have to, Ashley, I whispered. There's no other choice. You say that? She said, stepping closer, but I don't believe you. Just then, I heard Mark moving in the bedroom, and the tension between Ashley and me snapped. I shot her a look, and she stepped back, retreating to the living room. Mark entered the kitchen, completely oblivious to the undercurrent of emotion. Morning, sweetheart, he mumbled, wrapping his arms around me. Morning, I managed to say, though it felt distant. The rest of the day dragged on, and every moment with Ashley felt heavy, charged. Mark continued to laugh and joke, completely unaware of the tension that hung between us. As the sun began to set, Mark suggested heading back to the cabin for an early dinner. I agreed, desperate to retreat from the growing storm inside me. Back at the cabin, I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a focus that bordered on frantic. Ashley lingered nearby, her presence making every movement feel too sharp, too loaded. At one point, our shoulders brushed, and I flinched. You're avoiding me, she said softly. I'm not, I replied through clenched teeth, not daring to look up. You are, she insisted, and I get it, but we can't ignore this forever. I set the knife down, my hands shaking. I turned to face her. We have to, I whispered fiercely. This isn't right, Ashley. It can't happen. Before she could respond, Mark called from the living room, asking what was taking so long. I quickly composed myself, forcing a smile. Dinner's almost ready, I called back. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We ate dinner in silence, the only sounds being the clink of silverware and Mark's occasional oblivious commentary. I couldn't look at Ashley, couldn't risk meeting her eyes. When dinner ended, I excused myself, claiming exhaustion. But as I closed the bedroom door behind me, the tears came hot and bitter. A soft knock on the door made me freeze. I didn't want to face her, but she came in anyway. Ashley stood in front of me, her eyes full of longing and pain. We need to talk, she whispered. I shook my head, wiping away my tears. No, we don't. We can't. But she didn't listen. She knelt in front of me, taking my hands in hers. Mom, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please don't push me away. I looked down at her, and in that moment, everything inside me shattered. Her touch was gentle, desperate, and it was as though we had crossed a point of no return. The kiss that followed wasn't gentle. It was hungry, filled with every emotion we'd both tried so hard to suppress. When it was over, we lay together, trembling, the silence between us heavy with the knowledge that what had just happened could never be undone. What have we done? I whispered. Ashley kissed my forehead and whispered back, something we can't take back, but I don't regret it. Neither did I, and that terrified me more than anything. The next few days felt like an endless haze where the world seemed out of focus. We went about our routines, but everything felt different. Every glance from Ashley felt like an unspoken conversation, a shared secret that neither of us could escape. Mark remained oblivious, happy, and carefree, as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I could feel it in every word, every touch, every moment I spent with Ashley. At night, when the house was still and Mark was fast asleep, Ashley and I would share quiet moments, stealing glances across the room. Sometimes we would sit together, but the distance between us was always palpable. The memory of what we had shared loomed between us like a shadow we couldn't outrun. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, Ashley appeared in the kitchen. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, watching me. I cooed. Feel her eyes on me, and it made my heart race, even though I tried to ignore it. "You've been quiet," she finally said, her voice soft, but carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. "I'm just trying to focus on what's in front of me," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "There's a lot to do." But I knew it wasn't just the dinner that was weighing on me. It was everything that had happened between us, everything we were avoiding. "I can't stop thinking about it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, about what happened and what we both felt. I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ashley, we've talked about this already. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." But she shook her head, stepping closer. "It wasn't a mistake. I've never felt more certain about anything in my life. You can't keep pretending it didn't happen." I stepped back, my pulse quickening. "This isn't right, Ashley. We can't go down this road. It's not healthy." She took a deep breath, then reached for my hand. "Mom, I don't care what's right or wrong anymore. All I know is that I can't stop thinking about you, about us." Her words were like a weight on my chest, suffocating me, yet something inside me wanted to listen, wanted to give in. I yanked my hand away, shaking my head. "No, we can't do this. This is not us. You're my daughter." "But what if it's more than that?" she pressed. "What if we're not just mother and daughter anymore? What if this is something else? Something real?" Tears filled my eyes, and I looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know what this is, Ashley, but it can't be this." Ashley didn't respond. She just stood there watching me, and for a moment, I thought she might say something else, something that would change everything, but she didn't. She simply nodded and turned away, leaving me standing in the kitchen, frozen. The days that followed were filled with awkward silences and tense moments. Every time Ashley looked at me, I could feel the intensity of her gaze, a gaze that seemed to see right through me. And every time, I felt that same tightening in my chest, that mix of guilt, fear, and desire I couldn't shake. I tried to keep my distance, to focus on anything other than the emotions swirling inside me. But every time I looked at Ashley, the weight of our shared secret threatened to consume me. One night, as I sat on the porch, watching the stars, Ashley came out to join me. We sat in silence, the only sounds the rustling of the trees and the distant calls of night animals. "I know it's hard," she said, breaking the silence, "but I don't regret what happened, and I can't keep pretending it didn't matter." I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know what to say." "Ashley, you don't have to say anything," she replied quietly. "I just needed you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I can't. Not when you mean so much to me." The sincerity in her voice shook me to my core, and for the first time, I realized that the path ahead of us was not one we could easily walk away from. The love she spoke of, no matter how wrong it felt, was real, and there was nothing I could do to erase it from my heart. I stood up, brushing away a tear that had escaped my eye. "We have to stop this, Ashley, for our own good. This can't happen again." She stood too, her face softening, but her eyes still filled with that same deep longing. "I understand," she said, her voice breaking, "but I can't help how I feel, and I don't think you can either." The days after that conversation were filled with an unbearable tension. I tried to pretend things were normal, but it was impossible. Every time Ashley looked at me, I saw the truth in her eyes, and every time I looked away, I felt like I was betraying myself. Finally, on the last night of our trip, as the stars sparkled above us and the cool night air filled my lungs, I realized that I couldn't run from this anymore. The emotions, the confusion, the guilt, none of it could be ignored. Ashley and I stood together once more under the vast sky, and for a moment, everything else faded away. In the quiet of the night, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. But then I pulled away. I can't do this, I whispered, my voice shaking. Ashley didn't say anything. She just watched me, and in her eyes, I saw both the pain and the understanding. She knew I was right, but she also knew that neither of us would ever forget what had happened, no matter how hard we tried. We walked back inside, side by side, but the distance between us was already growing. I knew it wasn't over, not for either of us. The consequences of our actions would follow us, always lingering in the background, impossible to forget. And even as I lay in bed that night, listening to the soft sounds of the world outside, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the cabin, but it felt different. The air was thick with something unspoken, something that had changed everything. I lay in bed for a long time, unable to move, my mind replaying everything, every glance, every touch, every word spoken between Ashley and me. It was a nightmare I couldn't escape, a truth that felt suffocating. Mark was already up when I left the room, blissfully unaware of the storm that had been raging between Ashley and me. He greeted me with his usual cheer, a warm smile that felt strangely distant to me now. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, kissing my forehead as he passed me in the kitchen. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound normal, but it came out tight, forced. My smile felt like a mask, and I couldn't hide the emptiness inside. I busied myself with breakfast, pretending that everything was fine, though the weight of what had happened still hung heavily over me. Ashley came in shortly after, sitting at the table with a quiet gaze. She didn't speak, but her eyes were filled with something I couldn't quite place. A mixture of regret, longing, and pain. I couldn't look at her for too long. I couldn't bear it. Her presence was like a constant reminder of the line we had crossed, and the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it became. The day went by slowly, each moment dragging on as I did my best to avoid any more private conversations with Ashley. Every time our paths crossed, there was an invisible barrier between us, one that we both knew was there, but neither of us wanted to acknowledge. In the afternoon, we packed up and prepared to leave the cabin. The ride back home was quiet, the usual banter and laughter absent. I could feel Ashley's gaze on me once again, but this time I couldn't bring myself to meet it. I was too afraid of what I might see in her eyes. The familiar sights of home should have been comforting, but they only added to the heaviness that had settled in my heart. I thought that once we were back in our own space, everything would return to normal, but I knew that was a lie. Nothing would ever be normal again. Mark was busy unpacking the car, and I stood in the doorway watching him, but my mind was elsewhere. Ashley came inside behind me, and for a moment, I thought she might say something, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking at me with that same unreadable expression. I could feel the tension building again, the desire to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we stood in silence for what felt like an eternity, until finally, she turned and left the room. I couldn't stop myself from following her, though I didn't know why. It was like I was being pulled toward her against my better judgment. When I reached the living room, Ashley was standing by the window, her back to me. I hesitated for a moment, not knowing what to do or say, but then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know things are messed up, but I can't just forget it. I can't pretend like it never happened." I stood frozen, unable to move, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment where everything had to come to a head, but I didn't know how to fix it. How could I? "I know," I replied softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "But we have to move on. We have to forget about it." Her back stiffened, and I could see the frustration in her posture. "You can't tell me to forget it. You can't make me pretend like I don't feel this way. I can't just let it go. It's not that easy." I swallowed hard, the pain in my chest almost unbearable. "Ashley," I whispered, "we can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending. It's wrong." She turned around slowly, her eyes full of emotion. "I know. It's wrong, but I can't help how I feel. I don't know how to change it. I took a step back, my whole body trembling. You have to, for both of us, for our family. But even as I said the words, I knew that what we had done couldn't be undone. The feelings, the connection, the bond, whatever it was already there, and it wasn't going away. Ashley didn't respond. She just stood there, her eyes locked with mine, a silent understanding passing between us. She didn't have to say anything more. We both knew what had happened, and we both knew that it had changed everything. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how hard I tried to move on, no matter how much I wanted to pretend it had never happened, I would always carry it with me. It would always be a part of who we were. As I turned away and walked back into the kitchen, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. The guilt, the pain, the confusion. It was a burden I wasn't sure I could carry. But no matter what, I had to keep going. I had to keep pretending, keep smiling, keep moving forward, because that was what family did. Even when the truth was too painful to face, we kept going because we had no choice. And so we would live our lives, each of us holding our secrets close, never speaking of what had happened. But deep down, we knew the truth, and it would haunt us always.